Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of the AM Film Podcast. Bradley, you need to stop laughing because we've tried to intro this how many times?
7.
But we're just going to keep on going. So this is a special episode. Do you want to tell us why?
Yeah, because 2015 is over, which means we've got a lot to look forward to this year. There's many films coming out, but we're not talking about that. We speculated enough on the films coming out in recent podcasts. This episode, we are going to talk about our favourite top 3 films of 2015. And I think you'll agree that we've got a bit of a varied list going on. So, Callum, do you want to start?
Yeah, but first of all...
Or not.
No, just so everyone knows... This is not our definitive top 3 because we've basically worked out a list of our top 9 films collectively and we've shared them out because you don't want to hear everyone going, I like Star Wars, and then Bradley going, I also like Star Wars, for like later on in the list.
Spoiler alert, I do like Star Wars.
Really?
This is going to be a spoiler-free episode, so we will try and tone it down a little bit with what we're going to be talking about in terms of the film itself, but we'll talk about aspects that we like.
Well, yeah, because you only saw Ex Machina this week and it came out in February. So
don't drop that out.
So do you want to start down? I'll pass it down.
Yeah, I'll start first. So my third choice of this list is The Lobster, which came out at the end of 2015. Was really surprising, the exciting film. That I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. It was. I was expecting it as a dark comedy, as something that was going to be funny, but also have sort of quite dramatic moments in it as well. But it was a lot darker than I was expecting, but in a very sort of interesting way, in the fact that it clashed so much with what was funny about the film as well. And it has a great ensemble cast. Everyone in it is really, really great characters that they create. And just the whole sort of surreal concept of the film being about this hotel where people go to try and find love, and if they don't, they become animals at the end of it, is just such a bizarre thing. But the fact that it relates so well to society at the moment and the sort of the idea of dating in the modern world is really, really bizarre.
But yeah, so you've only seen it. Me and Bradley haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Which is one of the main things that annoyed me about this film. This film didn't have a wide release at all. I mean, like, I've got a picture, House, Odeon and Cineworld, and none of them were showing it.
Yeah.
And it was just, but I hope it'll come out on VOD soon.
Yeah, it might do. It might come out first.
How long ago was it released?
It was like October. Yeah.
October. Okay, so we've got a little while until it's
Yeah.
available on Blu-ray. Okay, so why did it make your top 3? What else did it push out, and why did it beat those films?
Well, it pushed out things like Sicario and things like that, just because I think it was like it managed to do something that I didn't think it could do, which was, like I say, be funny and be serious at the same time, which is something that's really difficult thing to do, is be a comedy and be a sort of satirical drama sort of play on the real world. And yeah, just in general, I thought like everything about it was well executed. It looked good. It was shot well. The direction was really good. There are some like key jokes in there that are some of the funniest jokes of the year. I think some of the funniest things that I've seen on in the cinema. So yeah, I think in every category, whether it's editing, sound, cinematography, performances, direction, it's just a really well executed film.
You talk about comedy being in like films that aren't really comedies. This year's kind of been quite a big thing for that.
Yeah.
I mean, like Star Wars is the funniest film I've seen all this year.
Without a doubt.
I mean, and even Ex Machina had some hilarious moments. I mean, the dancing of Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I really think like the comedies kind of shone through in not comedies this year.
It's because the comedies have been a bit understated in these films. Like, I think in terms of a year for comedies, I think it's been relatively weak. But it's nice to see that comedies are finding a place in drama more so than they have done in previous years. And that's always great to see.
I think it's because the filmmakers now understanding that is what makes drama real, makes it seem like understandable for an audience, is throwing comedy in there, because real life is full of comedy. Even like the most serious moments of life have jokes in them. And so that's why there's so much more comedy in drama now.
I mean, like another prime example of this, and we're going to talk about this much later on, is The Martian. The Martian is like a like, it could have been played so dark, but it was, the humor was so right. We'll go into that later on.
We will do.
So people should go and check out The Lobster.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's probably not at anyone's cinema anymore, as you were saying earlier, but when it's on our video on demand and on DVD Blu-ray, everyone should check it out.
So talking about dramas that have comedy, kind of leads on to yours, a drama that does not have comedy, and it is relatively dark. So you're number 3.
So my number 3 was Sicario, which is from the same director as Prisoners. It's got Keira Knightley in and the other guy, Spanish guy.
It doesn't have Keira Knightley in it.
Oh,
Emily Blunt.
Emily
Blunt.
Blunt. I always
I
get so
saved you. I
confused.
saved you.
This is why it's not your number 1. Right?
Javier Bardem.
Okay, so I'm not getting that out. Because, so Emily Blunt, and she was amazing. And I mean, like after Edge of Tomorrow, she was in that.
She's an action star, man. She's got a massive future in action films. But I wouldn't necessarily mind if she kind of steers away from that, because she's clearly a great actress and she can do drama so well. Like she went to places and
she can play both that action hero character and the sort of emotionally fragile character really well.
And why she was brilliant in this, or I'll give a bit of backstory to this. This is basically about the Mexican and American border, and it's basically a thriller about that and all the tensions that are there, which is brilliant. This film isn't her; it happens around her, and you really latch onto her as a viewer, which is why I like it. I mean, it's not like you're following her journey; like you're with her throughout this, and everything's happening around her while she's just like clueless, like same as us.
Yeah,
I think that's why this works so well. It was one of the tensest 2 hours I've ever had in a cinema. I think it was the tensest film since Prisoners, and that's a great testament to it because I love Prisoners, and it's just so different. I mean, it looks amazing. Visually, this film's aerial shots are stunning, and you just sat there and you're glad that the film is over in a good way because it's so tense. It's such a relief to come out of there.
Yeah,
it's a proper cinematic experience. And I mean, the soundtrack was amazing. It really kept you on edge.
I mean, all the way through, it hits all the right notes at the right times. But I think we need to give credit to Roger Deakins, who's one of the best cinematographers working. Yeah. I mean, he shot Shawshank.
And still hasn't won an Oscar either, which is
disgusting.
Well, DiCaprio hasn't, so
and the nighttime shots, everyone's giving all this attention to what the Revenant's doing and shooting in daylight. I mean, he shot at sunset, and the silhouettes that he gets with that skyline are incredible, and no one's talking about that.
And that final sequence of the film as well, in which they enter the tunnels, and it's all shot in night vision. But it's not really as spoilers because it's like you don't know who the characters are at this point. So it's only just in general the way that is shot by using night vision and heat vision as well to differentiate between characters. Is such an interesting cinematic choice.
Yes. And also, the cinematography for this, often in these kind of thrillers, the camera can give away what's going to happen, but it never does. I mean, there's one scene in this, again, it's on a motorway and there's a car sequence, and something is going to go down, but the camera doesn't linger on anything. It keeps changing, and you don't know what's going to happen or who's going to do it. Because it's just it never lingers, and it's always perfectly timed everything. And when it does occasionally linger, it kind of throws you off a scent, and then it messes you up, and you're psychologically on edge all the time, trying to work out, is this a good guy, is this a bad guy? Because there's no good or bad guys in this film. There's bad guys, but the line's very thin on absolutely everyone in this film.
It is you go back to what you said about Emily Blunt's character kind of being the audience, and that we follow her. We're not too sure who to trust. We're not too sure what's going on. I mean, sometimes the greatest parts of the film is when you expect a twist is about to be dropped, but nothing happens. And I think that's kind of great filmmaking, but it definitely has the best traffic jam in any movie ever. So it's a great choice. That was also in my top 5.
Yeah, mine too.
And also, it's surprisingly brutal. I mean, especially the last act of that film.
I think the opening sequence.
Exactly.
But pretty intense.
But we won't say anything else.
No, we won't. Just watch it.
No spoilers.
It's out on Blu-ray now, so there's no excuse not to go and watch it. But you should have seen it in the cinema because it's one minute, proper cinematic film.
But I should have seen Ex Machina in the cinema, so he'll like to talk.
Very cinematic film, unlike
Inside Out. That's a nice segue. Inside Out is without doubt one of the greatest animations that we have. In recent years, it's just an incredible film. I mean, it doesn't just work as an animation; it works as storytelling. It's got a great message behind it. It's not just for kids; it's for adults. It's for anyone that's going through a certain moment in their life. But on top of that, it's funny. It's got heart. It's just got something for everyone. I just think it's a near perfect film. A couple of moments I kind of felt a little bit flat. Where it did turn into a bit of a kid's film, but that's kind of understandable. It's an animation at the end of the day. But I mean, for me, it's in the top 3 for a reason, because it looks beautiful, and like I said, it's just got an incredible story to it.
It's full of detail as well.
Absolutely.
So that repeated viewings of it, you're always picking up on new things, new details that you're like, oh, that means something as well, and that means something. And it's full of stuff. Yeah,
I mean, so I know a child who's got autism. And his mum says that taking him to see this film kind of open up a new world for him. It made him understand his emotions more. And then you've got that compared to what my girlfriend said about the film, in that it's bloody hilarious. So, I mean, like I said, there's something in there for everyone. I mean, it's about understanding, you know, your thought process. Is about understanding emotions. Not everything has to be happy all the time. You know, I mean, the lead character's called Joy, for Christ's sake, you know. And but Amy Poehler does a great job with the voice work in there as well, because I know her from Parks and Rec. But in this film, like I think she's got the perfect line of adorable, but also like just a grounded character.
Yeah, I really think this film is perfect for being an original. It's an original concept, original idea. And it really doesn't force like any celebrities' voices into it.
Absolutely,
it just works as an original concept. And for that, in this like current day, when we're about to have Cars 3 in a couple of years, it's a blessing in disguise to have this film. I mean, like I wasn't as big on it as everyone else, but I mean, it's kind of weird because it has nostalgia of being a kid in it as well, and you kind of have that. And also, this film's in San Francisco, which nearly every American film has San Francisco in at the moment. I mean, it's crazy. But,
for me, I mean, you're probably going to disagree now because, like you said, you don't like it as much as everyone else. But for me, this felt like a feature-length version of the so what the end of Toy Story 3 did with that scene. The way that made me feel is what I felt through 75% of this film. Honestly, in terms of I could relate to what was going on in one way or another. Whether it's the husband and wife that are kind of having a conversation at the dinner table, but they're both lost in their own thoughts. I mean, you know that happens. You know you're not listening to what your wife's saying.
I mean,
maybe I shouldn't have said that on one of recording, but
I know I don't agree that it's better than Toy Story, but like even the facts and conversations of comparing it to Toy Story shows how much this film has done to people. I mean, like to even be compared to that caliber of film proves this is like one of the best, or probably the best animation of this year.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a better film than Toy Story 3, but I'm saying that it's what the ending done in terms of getting a response from an audience, and that's what it done to me throughout the whole film. And I think the only thing that was stopping it from being almost perfect, like I said, was like the characters. You've got one central character, but I felt like if you had a few more of those that you could kind of, fall back on, I think that would have worked well. But as it was, I really loved the film.
And as well, like all great animated comedies, it has a great balance of humor as well that reaches a whole wide range of audiences, not just humor for kids. There's humor in there that's really smart and like the adults will enjoy and find really funny.
I do think like that multi-tiered like level of the film is really coming out again. I mean, Star Wars reaches like us younger than us and older than us. Inside Out manages to do that again. And just reach out to everyone.
So yeah, that's mine. So my number 3 was Inside Out.
So another film that me and Bradley haven't seen.
Yeah, my list is going to get quite similar in its tone. So my second film is Carol, which I think in a similar way to Lobster, it did brilliant things in all forms, in its editing, in its cinematography, in its direction, in its performance. But it took it to just another level. It was just such an impressive film to watch. Like the fact that the film was shot on 16mm and is set in the 50s, it feels like a time machine. It feels like you're being transported back into this world, and you just want to like literally reach through the screen and touch everything. It's like the costuming is amazing. The performances are just so sort of on point. You feel like you're looking at people who lived in that time period, and like I think as well as a narrative, it's very progressive in its dealing with the idea of lesbian relationships, which is ironic, seeing as it's set in the 1950s, when a time when this wasn't an acceptable relationship. It deals with the idea of that as something that's so much more about like the love between two people than the actual fact that like, oh, they're two women in love with each other. Is more about just the love itself, which is a really like contemporary way of dealing with it. And it doesn't focus on like a lot of mainstream Hollywood cinema when it deals with lesbians is the sex. That is rarely even featured. There's one scene of it in the film, and it's not central to the narrative. So it's in general, I think it's just a masterpiece in direction from Todd Haynes, and something that everyone should see.
I mean, these kind of gone to.
No, I was going to talk about something slightly less relevant to that.
Okay, well, like these kind of films, like these like topics from back then. I mean, those are being covered in film in a great way at the moment. I mean, like, we've got the Danish girl talking about transgenders in the early 1900s, And then we have The Imitation Game,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
exactly like that, like last year's Oscars. I mean, those kind of films are really offering a unique perspective on what we like previously haven't seen in film. It's kind of like eventually, it's like rightfully so, like not a taboo anymore to talk about those kind of things. And in that time frame, and it's really bringing out these amazing stories and these different like characters and everything that we haven't seen in that kind of period piece before.
But I think it's the attention to detail that really separates Karen out from a lot of those other period pieces, because a lot of those period pieces, not only do they shoot on digital, and so there's almost like a sort of falseness to their past, that they're presenting a past that isn't quite real. It feels like a sort of a filmic past. Whereas this, being on film feels like you're there, and the detail of Todd Haynes' direction is so good, because like he was directing his extras in the background of shots and giving them like backstory. So it's like you're going to the shop, you're doing this, you're going to the airport, you're going to meet your husband at a meal, and every single character in the back of frame has some sort of life and story, and they're going to do something. And none of them talk, but they all have some importance in their own life. And so the detail is just impeccable.
One thing I did notice about this film is that it had a bit of a slow start in regards to people talking about it, but the word of mouth was quite strong.
Yeah.
The people that I was seeing going to the cinema when this was out was the audience went from being the older female audience to like people our age, like going with their partners, or people of all sorts that were going to the cinema to watch this. It wasn't just the older generation. So I think it's a credit to the film when you can get the younger audience talking about something that happened 4 decades before they were born. I think there's a lot of credit.
Well, I mean, that's what I was hearing about the story and thinking, well, that's not something really that interests me as a narrative. But then when I was starting to read reviews and watch reviews on TV, and I was seeing things, they were saying about how good it looked and all the detail about it and the costumes and things like that. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a really impressive looking film. And then I went and saw it and was just blown away by it. It's incredible.
I mean, also stand out with like all these period dramas within a 3-month period. I mean, we've had Brooklyn, we've had Carol, and now we've got the Danish Girl. And to stand out of those three must be brilliant.
Yeah. So, and it's going to be definite Oscar nods for Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, because their performances and the sort of the defining those characters is just done so well.
Well, I look forward to seeing that one.
Yeah.
Segue.
Yeah, segue. Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure I've got enough time to talk about my number one.
Cool. So, well, obviously, we'll talk about that. So, my second place is Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, a film that me and Dan have seen, and you again.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a poor year, and seeing the films that happen to be on this list. But so tell me what it's about and why should I see it.
Do you remember Be Kind Rewind with Jack Black?
Never saw it. No, I'm joking. Yeah.
You know what I'm going with, don't you?
I know what
it's basically a better version of that in essence.
Okay.
Imagine that meets Fault in Our Stars, but take away the crappy stuff of Fault in Our Stars.
That's a weird plan.
It's happening.
Yeah,
this film's not what I thought it was about.
So basically, it's about his teenage kids and his teenagers being forced to hang out with this girl because she has cancer.
Right.
And that storyline. I mean, it's a very blunt film, but in a great way. It feels blunt in so many times, but I mean, it really captures that kind of like coming of age story over a period of like a year or two.
Right.
And like I'm a big fan of Boyhood. I think everyone knows that, and it really captures that essence of kind of like teenage life and everything. Well, cool, because I'm still talking about Boyhood.
I don't think there's one podcast that goes by that you can't mention Boyhood.
It's the best one I've made.
Just drop a B word.
It's as good as Boyhood.
No, it's not
as
Boyhood.
good as Fault in the Stars. In your stars, Fault in the Stars.
Yeah.
It is.
By a long way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And slightly off Be Kind Rewind. So basically, this guy like makes films, like indie films, kind of like parodies, kind of, or homemade versions of like films and stuff. So I mean, he gets asked to make a film for the girl, and that's the whole film.
Right.
But it really flows well. I mean, like the music's great in it. Like all the actors are great, and there's like several big twists that I can't go into detail with because it will spoil the film. But it really is like such big twist for this tiny little film. And it really feels bigger than it is. I mean, like especially at the end, because it kind of starts off as a small kind of teenage film, but by the end, like you're kind of again stressed out by it, but you've really enjoyed it. So
well, I think what separates it from this, like you're saying about how many of the period films there were, and talking about Carol, there's so many young adult films around as well that are similar in this vein. But what separates Me and Dying Girl is that it's not pretentious, in that it's not like talking down to teenagers. It feels like a film made by teenagers for teenagers, like not a film that's written by an adult and directed by an adult for teenagers. Like it feels like these are real people, and they're like it's something you can really connect with.
And also, like this film, like it's very easy to make a generic teen kind of drama,
Yeah.
but it does some really interesting thing on how they show the film. I mean, like there's projections on walls, but done in very clever ways.
Right.
And like the way they present the like time passing, the film being made.
So
It's really interesting.
It's the whole film kind of shown through the this film that the boy shot.
No. So
No.
it's basically this guy makes films, but it's not about him making. Well, it's about him making films.
Right. Okay.
But it's not the film he makes.
Right.
If that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
basically his journey of making this film
Right. Okay.
for
Yeah.
a girl that he's been
So
forced
it's
to
not
hang
a
out
found
with.
footage movie.
No,
It's told as like almost like a diary, because she's writing it up as like an essay at the beginning of the film.
Right,
So
okay.
the whole film unravels as him like recanting what happened.
Interesting.
And also, it really flows, and it
Yeah.
and it really changes, and the dialogue feels so like
Yeah.
it kind of feels like an Aaron Sorkin screenplay,
Oh, okay.
Wait,
That's a massive compliment.
which is a massive.
Yeah.
As in, like every word said by these characters means something, and it's not just like dialogue put in.
Right.
So I really enjoyed this, and it really flew under the radar for a lot of people.
And it's really creatively shot as well. It's like really quite interesting and unusual. Like camera work is used throughout the film, and just quite sort of different from, like saying, those other young adult films. It's much more creative in every element of the film.
And again, like there's humor in this.
Yeah,
I like bearing in mind it's a film about a girl with cancer.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's quite a funny film at points.
It takes the right filmmaker to make a film that's about that, but also make it with heart and comedy.
But then it's what we were saying earlier about drama, in like the best dramas have comedy in them.
Absolutely.
And so that's why dealing with cancer with comedy works so well, because like that's how in the real world you deal with it, because you don't want to talk about how sad it is.
And also, I mean, with this, it could have easily fallen into kind of like Fault in Our Stars, where it's about this girl with cancer and she's getting really ill.
Right.
This film does not feel like that at all,
No.
and it feels about a friendship. I mean, it feels like this like layer on top, like really far and layers wise on top. But like at the core, this film is not about that, and it's about these two people who and their relationship throughout. And also, it doesn't take those turns that you would expect
Good.
about spoiling again, but it really does like twist and turns.
Because when you're pitching a movie like this, you're already starting to form plot points.
Yeah, they get together, then they live happy ever after.
I do feel like I need to confess something, which won't mean anything to you people there. When I gave you my top 8 earlier, I accidentally put in Jurassic World, but I actually meant to say Jobs. That's what that's what I meant to put in, because that is one of the best films of the year.
I completely forgot about that too. That would be,
and it would have been in my top 5, not quite punching out, Inside Out. But can I talk about my number 2? Or are you finished?
well, can we insert Steve Jobs in the middle, because I really talk about Steve Jobs.
We'll just talk about it briefly now.
Okay, we'll talk about Steve Jobs now. So our joint 2.5 would be Steve Jobs, an absolute masterclass from everyone involved, from Sorkin to Boyle, especially Assassin's Creed guy. Fassbender. It's a shame, because I said to you before the film was released, Michael Fassbender is a name that draws people to the cinemas. Clearly not the case, because not many people saw this, but that's an absolute shame, because the way that this film is structured, the way that it's shot, it feels like a piece of theatre, and I absolutely love it.
I made it so well not to tell Steve Jobs from birth to death.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was very confident in saying that we're going to pick 3 different like important bits of his life, and neither of those happens after the iPhone.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like the iPhone isn't even mentioned in this.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was really interesting when I heard about the structure of it, and that it was going to go to that point but not go onto the iPhone, because I thought that is much more interesting, because that's the point that we didn't see much about him. Like, he wasn't everywhere when it got to the iPhone. He was like the superstar that he became. That was the like sort of the beginning of that, and like leaving it where it ends is sort of just before we get into that superstardom sort of stage.
And again, like you were talking about earlier about shooting a film making it feel like a period piece.
Yeah,
this was shot in 3 different film types. It was in 16mm. 30,
so 35,
and digital, wasn't it?
35.
Was it digital at the end?
Yeah, digital.
I mean, just at the end.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and that really tells the story underlying it.
Yeah.
And again, like you were saying, it really puts you in those timepieces.
Absolutely.
And especially with technology being the background to that film, that it really does help that film progress. And it's a very interesting and probably expensive way to do it, but I really think it felt like it had a lot.
Yeah.
The only thing that was kind of a down point about this film, but not really, it wasn't a Danny Boyle film.
No.
It basically feels like he steered the ship in that direction, and it wasn't Danny Boyle. But I'm going to give that a miss as long as we get a Danny Boyle film within the next 2 years. It's Danny Boyle.
Yeah.
But none of this felt like it was like a gimmick. Like with the 3 film formats, shooting formats, it could have felt like it was a gimmick, but they never did. But you say that I feel like sometimes it did have a sense of Danny Boyle, like when he's talking about. It's in the trailer, the orchestra, he's telling where everyone sits. You've got a scene where he's talking to Kate Winslet and you've got projections on the side of the wall. Like, I think it's got a few Danny Boyle touches, but I see where you're coming from. But it certainly is a unique film that I think it's going to hold up. Whereas the Ashton Kutcher one, people
Let's
didn't
not
even,
talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this one's going to hold up for quite a few years.
Go on.
I was going to say until they make another one.
well, the thing is about this is that it shouldn't have been released when it was released by far. It should have been a February, March release.
Yeah.
But yeah, so go and check this out because it is a brilliant film. It's really been like missed by so many people, and it didn't have a wide release.
Talking of being missed, you can cancel the search party because I have found the Oscar of Alien, the director of Alien, right? Because he's back and he made The Martian. Okay, The Martian.
Segue.
Right?
I was really wondering where you were going with that.
Right. No, I fucked up and said Oscar. But no, what Ridley Scott does with The Martian is.
So this is your number 3.
This is my number 2.
2.
Because 2.5 was Steve Jobs.
Yeah, okay.
Joint, wasn't it? So this is my number 2, The Martian. From start to finish, it starts with a bit of a sci-fi action piece, and then what follows is just an incredible time on something that, don't call me crazy, but for a moment you feel like you're on Mars, right? The way that landscape feels, you start thinking to yourself, where did they shoot that? Because it's too real to be green screen. But we haven't been to Mars yet, so
that's a bit like Iceland in Interstellar on the ice planet.
Exactly
like that. It feels like a real planet.
Yeah, it does, and it's sort of Interstellar as well, right? But this is it's absolutely fantastic sci-fi. I mean, Ridley Scott, he needed it, but he actually absolutely pulled it out of the bag. But you can't just give all the credit to him because Matt Damon absolutely steals the show, and it was based on source material from an author whose name I'm not going to try and guess, but obviously the novel behind that is incredible as well. But it's a demonstration of what can happen if you follow the source material and appreciate, which Ridley Scott has said time and time again, he appreciates the source material. So I'm not going to change it. I'm just going to make it a film of the source material. But everything from the special effects, obviously the delivery of the dialogue, the action pieces when there are some. I mean, you feel tense at times because you're not too sure what's going to happen. And everything up until my number 1 film, which we'll talk about later. This was my favorite film of the year.
I mean, like one of the things you didn't mention was the ensemble cast in this. I mean, it basically was the Matt Damon show. But I mean, like the people around him were amazing in it, and everyone pulled their weight again. Acting-wise.
One of the characters did throw me off a little bit, which was. We'll talk about later because I can't remember his name. But I know what you mean. No, Sean Bean's all right.
I mean, that Lord of
where he doesn't die for once.
That Lord of the Rings reference.
Yeah. I mean, no spoilers, but I mean, it would stand out like a knife in your eyeball. Like that's how obvious it is. It's just a little bit awkward.
That camera shot.
Donald Glover.
Oh yeah.
Right? That felt a little bit over the top to me, and a little bit slapstick comedy, which is a little bit out of place. But then it kind of, brought it back a little bit because you got 3 sets of characters. You've got the stuff on Earth, the stuff on Mars, and obviously the team coming back from Mars, which I'm not spoiling because it's in the trailer, right? So you've got 3 sets of characters, right? And, all of those have got decisions to make. All of those have got things to do, things to think about. And it never once took away from it. Like the stuff on Earth, I mean, there's a time in the film where you spend 20 minutes on Earth. And if I said that to you out loud, you'd think, well, that's not what I'm paying to see The Martian for. This isn't a film about NASA. What's going on? But there's such drama there that I think it's,
It really is a great sci-fi epic, and,
It is, yeah.
it doesn't. Okay, I'll go back to Interstellar, but don't ever go about this. Interstellar aimed too high and trying to be really intellect and super space nerdy.
Yeah.
And there's also these like lower space films where it's like, oh, we're in space, like let's fight aliens. This film just manages to be a perfect sci-fi film and landed that absolutely.
Ridley Scott, right? This is where he needs to take most of the credit. Is that he knew, like you said, he knew where the balance was. He knew how to make it a sci-fi, but he knew how to make it fun.
Yeah.
Right. He knew how to make it, you know, something to think about intellectually, and he knew when to give you laughs. You know, there's a perfect balance in there, and it's the second best film that's set in space this year.
But
I wonder what your number one's going to be.
You mentioned comedy there though as well, because that's the really interesting thing as well about the film, is that like it's so funny as well, that like being so dramatic but also so funny at the same time. So funny to the point that the Golden Globes have nominated as a comedy instead of a drama.
Yeah,
which is just like but yeah, it's like overall, like you say, the ensemble is brilliant. Like they all, like, even with the smallest amount of screen time that they have, they will bring something to it.
You felt like a little bit of a Sherlock in space.
So anyway,
try
and segue.
So I will segue. From deep space, we go to deep feelings, no doubt. Because that's what your list is. I'm good at this. I'm like,
Should be an actual TV presenter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my top choice of the year is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is a really, really interesting film from this year. It's been described as an Iranian vampire. I was going to say vampire, that's not a thing. An Iranian vampire western, and it's shot in black and white as well. It's just like it's definitely aiming for that indie market. But it's like, but yeah, as a film, it's just incredible. It's got everything that makes a great sort of independent film like that. It's got really great, like, weird and bizarre characters, but also is really interesting as a vampire film. Like if you really like things like Let the Right One In, this is a film that's right up your street as well, because it's about this female vampire character and the sort of control and sort of presence that she has over this mysterious Iranian/American city that she lives in. And it's a brilliant, like, first film from a new director, and a new director with a pretty much new crew and new cast as well. And so it's really impressive that they've produced such a, like, brilliant film, which tops out my list and beats everything that I've seen this year, including a certain massive science fiction film that we will mention later.
I mean, like, it's kind of been a year of indies. I mean, like half of this list is indie films. When you think about it, I mean, and they're kind of breakthrough indie film. Like, to go back, it will be the next film we're going to talk about. But it just really, like, all these indie films are not indie films anymore. They're like being classed as big films and with big releases.
At the end of the day, they're lower budget films that are getting a bigger audience, and that's always great to see. I think we are starting to see a bit of a gap forming from the lower budget to the higher budget, in terms of there's a much more noticeable quality difference in terms of actual aspects on the screen. But in terms of the filmmaking, it's great to see so many independent filmmakers are storytellers. And these are the guys that are going to end up getting gigs with Marvel, because they're the people that they look for. I will put you on the spot. How did you see this?
I saw it at the Curzon Cinema in Canterbury, in the local cinema.
Because nowhere near me was playing it.
That's the thing. This was a late screening, so it was what Curzon calls a Curzon Curates screening, which is like they do it sort of months after the main release of the film.
Okay.
And so what shows how impressive that film is that I went and saw the film on that evening, was like on the edge of my seat for the entire film. I then came home after it, went straight on Amazon, searched it up, found that because it was a later screening, it was already out on DVD, straight on for one day delivery, had it here the next day, watched it again that evening, and then like another time in that same week. And it's the film that I probably watched the most times this year.
Was the cinema busy? Oh,
yeah, pretty busy. It was like there was probably about 75% of that screen full.
Just to clarify, I was not accusing you of piracy. I was wondering because I've heard so many positive things about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't released at my local theatre.
No.
Local theatre.
But as I say, it's now on DVD and Blu-ray, so it's definitely something that I should get out and try and see.
one thing, Lee, your segue is going to be so easy for the next two films. I mean, because the guy in that's and that.
Yeah, that's true.
So-
That's true. Yeah.
So do you want to segue? You can do that. What just gave you one about indie
You could say,
films?
yeah, it's
Say,
the
go
next
for one
step
indie
up.
I
films.
love Ex Machina.
You didn't even try, did you?
I
Just
didn't
like-
try.
So my
No need.
so
Just
my
not good.
number one film out of my top three, excluding your films that you picked. that was a very convoluted sentence, though, wasn't it? Is Ex Machina, which is what's the guy's name? Garland. Alex Garland.
Yeah, Alex Garland. Yeah.
Alex
Talk
Garland.
for a second. I'll double check.
No, it's Alex Garland.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
Alex Garland,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's his directorial debut. He's written with Daniel Boyle
Yeah.
on 28 Days
28
Later
Days. Yeah.
Sunshine.
and
Sunshine.
Sunshine. So, and he's finally broken out for this indie film. I mean, it was made for
Yeah.
a couple of $1 million, which is absolutely nothing. And you wouldn't tell it by this film.
No,
I mean, this film's going to be nominated for visual effects awards around the season
definitely.
because it looks amazing. But like, I mean, first of all, it's like a Shakespearean story.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, again, there's so many twists and turns in this, and it's such a small cast. I mean, there's three
Only
main players,
3 people. Yeah.
3.5, kind of.
Right.
But I mean, and it also features the best dancing scene of this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of-
And if things like that in the film, obviously without spoiling anything, it all felt natural. And he hit the nail on the head, the filmmaker, when he said that this film takes place 10 minutes from now.
Yeah.
It was set in a world that felt like the future, but a future that could very much happen. And that's, I mean, when you look at Mark Zuckerberg's recent status, where he says that he wants to
Oh, so
this
yesterday,
year he wants to
yeah.
create an AI for his house.
Well,
That-
he could
that's-
be
Basically, what that is.
he could
Yeah.
be substituted
Yeah,
for Oscar Isaac's
exactly. Yeah,
character
that's
straight away.
exactly it. And it feels like, I mean, for me, the breakout, I know John Boyega is pretty much the favourite to get breakout star of the year at the BAFTAs. But for me, it's Alicia
Vikander, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to butcher that name. So I'll leave it to, like, she's been in like so many films. Just I'm not even going to list them off. Just like Google her, and she's been in like 4 films this year. And you know, her performance in this is absolutely
And she's
extraordinary.
She's in the Danish Girl.
Yeah, to the extent where I
Yes.
didn't know that was her.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
granted, she's half
Such a-
robot
such a
in this,
transformative
but like, you know,
performance.
I mean, and also, who's the ginger guy in this? He's in everything.
Donald Gleason.
Donald Gleason. I mean, he's had an amazing year. I mean, the Revenant, Star Wars,
Yeah.
this, Brooklyn, he's also in.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been in all recent films, and he's really shown that he can.
Yeah.
And Suffragette as well. I mean, well, I think he's a Suffragette. I think, but he's not main character.
No. I
Oh,
don't think so.
no, but
No, you're thinking of
oh,
Wishaw.
Ben Whishaw,
Yeah.
but either way, like those 4 films show how versatile he is as an actor. I mean, like
He was in one of my favorite films last year, Frank, as well. So
Yeah.
exactly, and I think with Star Wars especially, he's proved he can play the geeky guy. And then Star Wars, he plays the like biggest Nazi in the world,
Yeah.
which is basically what the dark side is.
Yeah.
So I mean, like like Oscar Isaac, her and him have all been brilliant as a
Yeah,
whole.
they're both unrecognizable. Like they're absolutely all 3 of them. Like they're absolutely outstanding.
But also mentioning you said about the Shakespeare thing as well. That's something that's really great about the film as well, because it's very rare for science fiction films like this to be so like engaging that you want to rewatch them again. And each time you do rewatch them, you then see more, and because it's like such a complex, like you say, Shakespearean narrative. It's such a complex sort of layer upon layer upon layer, and constantly shifting and changing. You spot things at the beginning of the film that relate to something at the end of the film that you didn't see the first time around because you weren't paying attention to that. And it's something that is probably the second film that I've watched the most after A Girl.
Yeah, I mean, like I was lucky enough to go to the re-release they had about 2-3 weeks ago when they had it in cinemas again. So I've seen it twice in the cinema and several times outside of that. And it just works as a whole film. I mean, like it flows so naturally throughout the whole thing.
Does.
Yeah.
And you do pick up on these tiny little moments and the actions of all the characters. And kind of like Sicario, you do not know who the good guy or bad guy is at the end. At the end of the film, it's so subjective. I mean, someone gave me a reading point of view, and you think, oh, I've seen this all wrong.
Yeah.
He's the bad guy,
Yeah.
and these are the good
This
people.
is what I was gonna say to you. Like I guarantee, if we talk about even the final shot of the film, we'll both have all 3 of us have different opinions on what that
Exactly.
means. That's the great thing about this, and I'm so pleased that he's finally managed to write a good ending. No, right? Because Sunshine, 28 days, right? The last 5 pages of those, he headbutted
I have to
keyboard.
say, I really do like the ending of Sunshine, though. I have to.
A conversation
Disagree.
for another day.
So from
but-
one Oscar. I was gonna
Was
say
you trying to segue?
I was going to say your segue, but go on.
I was gonna let you know.
Go on. But yeah, it's an amazing film.
It's from start to finish, and if you said this film's 2 hours, it's got 3 characters set in one location, you're like, okay, can we just skip to the next one? Don't. Like, it's incredible.
And also, I mean, like everyone goes on about wanting a bigger and bigger budget. This is a film where possibly the success lied in having a tiny budget, being an independent film. I mean, like, because let's say we did have like double the budget, would they have explored the more of the outsider thing that's spoiling it? And you kind of think about is that limitation and the practical effect of not going over the top, but doing a very realistic but not quite there of the AI. I mean, I really think it's a perfect example of a small budget that can be made amazing.
I love it. I mean, it's the second best sci-fi of the year. The number one sci-fi of the year is Star Wars. Do you want to, what was your segue out of interest?
I was going to say from one Oscar Isaac film to another.
Oh no!
Because
he got the number one segue. Number two segue.
No, Star Wars for me, a lot of people are going to say it's not the best film. It's a copy and paste of Episode 4, blah de blah. There are many of the same beats in there, but let's talk about this as a film. Let's forget anything else exists before, after, even during it. It's just a film that exists. This film is currently my life. Right, that's actually quite sad. It's not my life. It's just like 95% of, I loved it. I think from the very start, the way that they introduced the new characters, going back to Oscar Isaac, I mean, he's so much fun in this film. I want to see more of him. They got all the cast right. I mean, it was nice to see the old cast back for 30 seconds. And like, it was fantastic. Like, just from a storytelling point of view, the way that they went about it. And I think they corrected a few things from Episode 1 through to 3. I also think there's a few low blows.
A few things.
There's a few low blows in there. But overall, I just love Star Wars Episode 7. I think in a few years' time, when the hype for this film's kind of died down, and we're all looking at Episode 9, all the spin-offs, I think people will appreciate this for being a great opening chapter to a new trilogy. Which is what you need to remember what it is, because going back and looking at it, Episode 4, there's no Yoda in there. There's only a little bit of Vader. I mean, Luke hasn't even really, fought anyone. So I think there's a lot more in here that people aren't giving it credit for, just because they're relating it back to Episode 4.
That's how the best series of films work, because the best trilogies of film work that way, because you don't want to give your audience everything straight away, because then there's nothing left to give, and you end up that's why they're sort of teasing you with these things and giving you little bits of certain characters. There's going to be more of them later on.
I mean, this film pushed the new characters a lot more than I thought they were going to, and it really worked because basically this film had to be a transition film.
Absolutely.
And if it failed, Disney basically got 4 films to recover that from. But instead of recovering, they're building on top of every film. And I'm really excited to see where they go. I mean, I've seen it 3 times now. And the last time I saw it was with my nephew, and he absolutely loved all the characters, like BB-8 and everyone like that. And I do kind of feel like the main characters that came back were very, very well placed. And they were used as they should have been used.
Absolutely.
But it does go slightly too far sometimes, but you can't really ever go there. I mean, by the time R2-D2 comes into it, and it's not a spoiler because R2 and C3PO are going to be in this film. They've already confirmed that. I mean, Anthony Daniels on those press for it. You kind of want to go back to BB-8. You love the new characters that much. You really want to go on your own adventures with Finn, Rey, and Poe Dameron. You want to go on their adventures.
Absolutely.
And you kind of want to leave these characters behind. The old characters behind. It sounds really brutal that, but they did such a good job of these new characters that I wanted to go on an adventure with them by themselves and see what these new young people to this whole world that none have ever seen.
Which is what part 1 of a trilogy needs to do. It needs to make you fall in love with the characters. And I think the performances, I mean, we've talked about Domhnall Gleeson now, we've talked about Oscar Isaac. We need to talk about Daisy Ridley, because she's an absolute powerhouse in this. She is... Well, I mean, she's incredible.
I mean, bearing in mind she had no acting credits on a big film before. It's unbelievable.
Got cut out of In-Betweeners 2. And she got cut out of In-Betweeners 2. I bet you didn't say that in her audition. So from being cut from In-Betweeners 2 to starring as what's pretty much going to be the lead in these next 2, 3, 4, maybe 20 films.
We'll bring it back to what you're saying about new and old as well. That's why this is really interesting is that it doesn't over-reference the old, but it also brings stuff that is new, and that Daisy Ridley being in the main part is something that's really new and interesting. It's having a really strong female lead character, and putting the young male character as the sort of sidekick almost is really sort of contemporary and interesting way of telling a narrative like this.
But just to sum up, the reason it's my number one is because it's done something better than the other films on my list have done. It made me, have fun. Well, it allowed me to have fun. It made me think, and it made me feel. Yeah. Those are the three things that you need to do when you go into a film. From a comedy to a drama to horror, anything, you need to at least feel something. And I felt something during this film from the opening text. When that crawls up, you feel like I'm actually watching an event.
And everyone,
I felt part of something. And
everyone's on this film side to do well. Like there are the few haters, but like even their comments are really like argued against for and good arguments. And even the few arguments that are out there, the ones that are put together really well, kind of like come back to thing as it's part of a trilogy. And you've got those two films to redeem it. And it really is like everyone's rooting for this film, and it definitely deserves to do well.
I mean, a question that's kind of slightly not based on our top three list. Do you think it's too early to be comparing JJ to like someone like Chris Nolan? Like they've been around for a few years, because he's made, from as far as I'm concerned, JJ's made 5 films, and at worst they are good. Okay, I love Super 8, I love Star Wars, I liked the Star Trek films, and I really like Mission Impossible 3.
See, I kind of get what you mean with that, but with JJ and Nolan takes stuff and then completely changes it. Rather than, like with the two existing properties that JJ has handled, Star Wars and Star Trek, he hasn't reimagined. He's just kind of like rectified and done well. Rather than Nolan with the Batman, obviously changed the company. I know both of those are in very completely different situations on how his films are made. But I think they're two different directors.
Right.
If that kind of makes sense.
So if there's an option,
Nolan's more of a visionary.
Episode 8, who would it be?
I wouldn't go Nolan for episode 8 because I think Nolan would want to do something different and new, rather than JJ that can come in and can work with loads of other people. Like Nolan's like quite famous for only working with people he knows.
Yeah.
Rather than JJ that can collaborate really well with everyone else. And that's to both their credits.
JJ is a great franchise man, isn't he? I think. But I think Ryan Johnson, this doesn't take anything away from Ryan Johnson. I think he's going to nail episode 8. But time will tell. But the fact that we're looking forward to episode 8 kind of just demonstrates why this film's so bloody good. But yeah, so that is our top 3 each. We probably run a little bit over time. But that's our list. Tell us where we went wrong, or don't, because we could have gone on for ages, each talking about our top 10. Which I'll probably do, behind the scenes anyway. But yeah, so that's our top list. Let us know what yours is. So Dan, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Stukes on Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter at Moorin or at the Angry Microwave. And subscribe to us on YouTube, please, or SoundCloud, or iTunes, or anywhere you see our name. Just like press a button that somehow links to us.
Yeah, show us the love, because we like talking, but we also like to know that you like us, like to talk. That was the worst. Out of all my segues, that was the worst.
We sound really insecure. Please like us.
Yeah, please. But you can find me at Bradley_J_Evans, just because Bradley J Evans was taken. So that's what I am better. I've had that account for 5 years, and he still's not deleted his account. So yeah, that'll do it from us. Look out for our spoiler episode of Star Wars, which we're about to record.
No, it's part of the magic. You can't tell them that.
Which we've recorded.
Yeah. I've got to go change my shirt.
Yeah. But until next time, see you later.